One of the coolest thing about Langchain is the ability for us to load various kind of data and feed it to the model. So one of those data is like CSV file. So the ability for us to actually feed this CSV to our model and ask question on this data is incredibly powerful because it allows us to get a better insight on the data, especially from a business perspective. So say you have a product and you've maintained the CSV file for that of your customer email name and the reviews part. You could ask the model to give you the reviews of the people who have given you the highest ratings. So instead of manually you going and checking it out, you could actually ask the model to do the laborious work for you. Because of that reason, I think CSV loaders are one of the more powerful ones which we can leverage for our business. So in this video, I'll go over how to use how to feed in your data to Langchain in Node.js. So we'll go over what embeddings are, what retrieval QA chain is. So here's a quick sneak peek on what we will be building. What is the email of the person who has given a review of 7? Okay, let's see. Okay, so the email of the person who has given 7 is this person. Let's check that. Let's just find it out. I don't want to EBO Abortral. Okay, so it is kind of correct because he's given me the rating of 7, review of 7, and yeah. Alright, so I've got an empty VS Code running here. So let us initialize a package.json file with ES6 and we'll give a Y flag for the default settings. We'll also install TypeScript. Next up, we'll install TS Node as a development dependency, TS Node, and we'll also install types for Node. Okay, I misspelled that. Add types / node. Cool. Now we'll have to create a tsconfig file. This is the command for it, which is npx tsc init, which initialize it, and root dir for the we'll keep it as source, and the output directory will be dist. Es module interrup allows us to compile TypeScript to JavaScript. We'll be using ECMSA, I think it's called, scripts 2020, and we'll target the same scripts, and we'll use module node next, and we'll also give no implicit any true, just for more stricter types. So yeah, that's given us a tsconfig file here. Nice. So now we'll need a couple of dependencies for Langchain and all that jazz. So before that, we'll have to give a script. So the development script will be ts node, and we'll give it the ESM flag. We'll point it to source directory, and we'll call it we'll give an index.ts file. So this is yet to be created. So once that's done, let us create a new file called index.ts. So this should be inside a source directory. So index.ts. Perfect. Next is we'll install Langchain. Langchain. We'll need OpenAI .env to actually pull the env variables, and hnsw lib. This will be our vector database. and we'll also be needing something called d3 dash dsv. So basically, because we are dealing with CSV file, under the hood, for something which I'll elaborate on later, we'll be using something called CSV loaders. So under the hood, it requires this dependency. I'll explain it a little later. So let's hit enter. And okay, so while that's being done, let me have a .env file. Let's also create a .getignore. We'll mention node modules, and inside here we'll also have .env file. Okay, so I think with that everything is done. Let's just wait for this to get over. So everything is done installing. So while it was installing, I've also created a file called .env.examples. So basically inside the .env, there's this open AI API key variable, and I've given it the API key which I've got from OpenAI. That's pretty straightforward. I think I don't have to demonstrate that. So I've done that. So you can just if you're forking the repository or cloning it, you can just change this example to .env and you'll be good to go. Okay, so let's test out whether everything works, because most of the time when you first initialize something it doesn't work. So let's try it. CSV Langchain, and let's run the server and see. Run dev. Let's see what happens. Cool. I didn't save it. Let me save it. I run the server again. Okay, so we got CSV Langchain. So yeah, cool, everything works. So first off, let's bring in the imports. So these are all the imports which we'll be using in our code, which is OpenAI, retrieval QA chain, HNS, WLib, OpenAI embeddings, recursive character text splitter. I'll go over these in more detail once we get to that point. So next is the loaders. So basically these are all the loaders that Langchain provides us. We can use these loaders to get the text from the documents in our code. So this is basically some of those loaders. So we have JSON loader, text loader, CSV loaders which we'll be using, and then we have PDF loader, and there's another one called EPUB loader which we won't be dealing with in this video. So once that's done, let's bring in the last imports, which is config.env to load our env variables, and document. This is basically just for giving the types for TypeScript. Okay, so let's use config to load the env variables. So once that's done, let's bring in the loader. I will be using something called directory loader. So in here we have to give it a path. So the path will be /docs, and inside that we can give it some parameters. So these are some of the parameters which are passing. So directory loader, basically what it does is, whatever the path which we've given here, which we've not created yet, it takes in, it goes through that path and checks the the extension of the file, so .json, .text, .csv or .pdf, and based on that it uses the correct loaders. So let's create a folder over here, docs, and inside that let's have a file called mockdata.csv. So these are some of the data for the CSV which I got from Mockaroo. So some mock data. So we can ask questions. So we can ask Langchain questions on this data. It's not very complex. It's quite simple one. Let's as we are learning, we'll just use that. So once that's done, you can see I've given a extra parameter here called separator. So because we're using CSV loaders, we'll also have to mention what delimiters we are using. So in our case, it's comma. As you can see here, it's a comma. So we're using commas as delimiters. So once we have loaders, let us actually see what's in the document. So let's use docs await loader dot load, and let us console log out the docs so we can see what's in it. Now let me run the server again. See, as you can see, we've got the logs for the documents. So it's basically it's an array of document, and inside the document we have a page content object and we have a metadata object. So it's split it into, I think it's 10. Yeah, so we have 10 rows, I believe that's why. Yeah, 10 rows. Yeah, so that's how the document looks like once it's loaded. Next up, we'll have to just take this part. So when we're feeding it to our Langchain, it requires only this part, the page content part. We don't need the metadata source line. We just need the page content part. So let's get that. So we can do that by having a map function. So CSV content, I'll call it, and let's map over that. And inside the map function, let's create a doc, and let's give it a type document, which we've initialized right here. And then we can say doc dot page content. So once that's loaded, we can again see what it has. So CSV content, and I guess I'll just comment this out and we can see what we have here. So we should just get the page content now. Yeah, so this is now an array of the page content, as you can see here, right? Cool. So once that's done, once we have the CSV content, we can create our function to create a function for asking the model about the data. So let's create a function for that. So let's call it const ask model, and we'll give it a parameter called question. So when we actually execute this function, we'll give it a parameter, the question, which will be a string type, and inside that let us start with giving the model. So this can be any model, but we'll be using OpenAI. So new OpenAI, and we'll also have to pass in the API key. So OpenAI API key will be process dot env dot OpenAI API key. So this will allow us to use the OpenAI model. So once that's done, let us create a vector store. So this is basically just a let variable which will have where we'll give the vector store. So once we've initialized it, we can start playing around with the recursive character text splitter. So now let me create something called text splitter, and in here we'll initialize a recursive character splitter. So what this basically does is it kind of splits the text into chunks so that it is so that the model can easily interpret it. So it gives us two parameters, which is chunk size, which in our case will be 1000, and we'll also have chunk overlap, which is 900. So one of the things that you should know is chunk overlap should never be more than chunk size. You'll get an error if you do that. So for your model to work accurately, you have to play around with these two variables. So in some instances you would need a lower number, meaning more chunks, and in other instances you'll have to have a bigger chunk size, which means like you'll have smaller chunks, more number of chunks. So from what I understand is, if you're fine tuning and you want a very granular look on the data, you would give a very high chunk size. But if it is something very you want in a holistic view of that data, you keep it much lower. So that's basically what I understand from what chunk size is. And chunk overlap basically sees how these texts overlap with each other. So if I'm wrong about this, please let me know. But from what I've read on the internet, that's what I've understood. All right. So next, let us console log out these. Let's just see what is in this text splitter. So let's console log it out. Let's just give, I think I misspelled this to text splitter. All right. So now let us run the server. So I've also, okay, uncommented I commented that out, so that won't be a bother. Okay, I'm getting nothing. Let's check again. Why is that? Oh, so it's because I haven't actually called the function. So ask model, and let's say what is, okay, that's nice. What is the meaning of like, wait, let's run the server now and see. Okay, so the chunk size is 1000, which I've mentioned here, 900. So the text is splitting now. Cool. So once it's split, let's say split docs, we'll have to await text splitter dot we'll create a document called CSV with CSV content. Okay, here it should be an async function. Have I not mentioned it? So async, yep, async. Okay, split doc. Then let's have a vector store dot will await hnswlib dot from document. I'll explain what this does shortly. So we'll give it the split docs, and we give it the new OpenAI embeddings. Okay, cool. So what's happening here is basically we are creating a document with the CSV content, just the page content part. Okay, just, I think, yeah, just this part, which is an array, and we are putting that while like the document which is created into the split docs. So it's basically a document of this split docs. So then what we are doing is we are initializing hnswlib. So this is basically, we have other vector stores, which I think one of them is ChromaDB, and we also have another one which is not coming to my mind right now. Okay, yeah, it's Pinecone. So these are the two very well-known one. I guess ChromaDB is an open source one, but hnswlib is something in memory. So there's not a lot of configuration that has to be done, whereas for the other two you'll have to go through some steps. But if you want a video on those two, please let me know. I'll make a video on that. It's an interesting topic, but for our use case for this video, because the whole point is to know what Langchain is, I don't want to complicate it even more just going over the vector stores and configuring all that. But just think of this as a vector store where we can store embeddings. So what embeddings actually is it kind of what this does is it saves this document into vectors. So kind of like this 0.4, yeah, you get the point. So it saves these documents, it converts it into these vectors and saves it in this vector store. So this is basically done for the model to accurately judge based on the query which we are making. It kind of um, understands like when we are sending a query to it, it again changes that to this vector, and then it cross checks that vector with what will be saved in this vector store. uh, it'll become more clear very soon. So let's now create this vector store. So await vector store dot save, and we'll call that file as, let's say, my vector dot index. And let's also console log out a message for us saying the vector store is created. Okay, so once that's done, we'll use a retrieval chain, retrieval QA chain. Okay, so Langchain has something called a retrieval and a QA chain. So basically the retriever retrieves the document, and then a QA chain is used to answer a question which we ask to it. So let us create the chain. So const chain retrieval QA chain dot from LLM. So we have to give it the model. So in our case it is OpenAI, this one, model, and we can use vector store dot as retriever, so we can get those text. So once that's done, let us give a console log saying let's say querying, and then we can get the response from the chain. So await chain dot call, we give the call function, and we give it the query question. So again, when this is done, this question is turned into an vector. It's turned into a vector which looks something like this. I'll probably put in a image for this. Yeah, so it'll look like this, and the question will be transformed into something like this, and it actually, this checks against this vector store, which is kind of vector stores is also accumulation of these vectors, and it checks whether what matches, and based on that it gives a response to us. Okay, so now let us console log out the response, and I think with that all our configuration is in. So all of the heavy lifting is done by Langchain, and we just had to use some functions and just had to connect the dots, and we get a custom model basically. So now let's, instead of this, what is the meaning of life, which is not relevant to this data at all, what we can do is we can just ask a very vague question, like what are the columns in this data set. Save that, run the server. Okay, this data set has column for ID, first name, last name, email, gender, and review, which is correct, but that is kind of a boring question. So let us ask something a little more detail about the data set. So what are the genders in this data set? So we have male, female, and non-binary. Male, female, and non-binary. Cool. So one of the other things which we can do when we're using CSV loader is actually just extract out a single column and ask questions on that column. So the way we do that is we give it an parameter for the column parameter, the column which you want to extract and ask question on. So we'll ask question on gender, just to know how many males and females are there in that data set. I'll also console log out the CSV content just to show you what is being what is being extracted as a CSV content. So here, let me ask how many males in the dataset. I'll run that and let's see what happens. So it should be okay. So you can see we have an array of just the gender part, just this part, male, female, and all that, because we've mentioned the column as gender. And then we get the responses for males. So what about females? We have 3 females. Okay, let's ask which gender is more popular in the data set. It should be male. Let's see what the response is. Or I think it's female. I don't know. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's male. 5. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So male is the popular like the gender which is which comes up more in this data set. So now let us ask something which I'm really curious on. So I've given a column called review, and let us ask something which is more relevant to the reviews. So right now I've removed the columns, so now the entire CSV content should be loaded. So in here, let us ask who has given the highest review, and let's see what the okay, let's be more specific. So who has given what is the, forgive my grammar here, but what is the name, what is the first name? I believe it is, let's see, go here, copy this. What is the first name of the person who has given the highest review? Okay, as you can see here, we are getting the entire document now. Okay, it's giving me, I don't know. Okay, let's say what is the highest review. So sometimes it does that. It's giving me the response is 7, which is wrong for some reason, because it should be 10, this person. Let's try another thing. I don't know why that comes up. I tried to play around with these chunks and overlaps, but for some reason sometimes it gives me completely wrong answers. Yeah, so if you all know why that occurs, please let me know. So next up, let's ask what is the email of the person who has given a review of 7. Okay, let's see. Okay, so the email of the person who has given 7 is this person. Let's check that. Let's just find it out. I don't want to EBO Ebotral. Okay, so it is kind of correct because he's given me the rating of 7, review of 7, and yeah, cool name though. Yes, that's beside the point. So now you can understand how powerful this Langchain is. Now everybody can create their own models, and actually learn on like how their they can understand their data set even more better. So we've just used CSV file because I think that's the most powerful like kind of loader, because you can ask data on your you can ask relevant questions to your data, whereas you have plenty of videos on PDF. You got text. I think text is the most popular one, but I've not seen many the CSV ones, a video on how CSV works. So yeah, so I just wanted to show it to you guys. Let me know how you liked it, and let us expand on this Langchain world a little more later. Thanks for watching.